I remember just coming back to my Airbnb. That was I was renting like a little room in like a house, and just like there were days when I would just sit there and like wonder if I made the right decision, you know? I was like, I don't know if this is the right choice. I'm not making any money. Should I not have been so stubborn? Should I just have pursued something safe, you know? And I think ultimately it was me who told my parents, like, look, give me just like 1 or 2 more months. If I can't find a job in this industry, I will find another job. It doesn't matter what job it is. I'll just find another job and I'll just do that.
It starts with just taking that leap.
Man, you have to work hard. You have to be incredibly smart.
Choose something that even if it fails, you are going to be proud of it.
Doesn't matter how badly you got beaten in battle.
Be kind, be kind, be kind.
Become a better person, a better leader, a better business.
Go with your gut.
I'm Samuel Donner, and this is Finding Founders. Struggling to find work in the entertainment industry and fearful of disappointing her parents, Inga's filmmaking career could have ended her first year in LA. Maybe it was time to look at something practical, something safe. Flash forward, and we now know Inga Lam as the immensely talented video producer and food influencer at BuzzFeed's Tasty, Bring Me, About to Eat, and her own personal channel. She appeared all over your feed in viral videos like Mom Teaches Daughter How to Make Bao and I Made the Impossible Cotton Candy from Ancient China. These videos have racked up tens of millions of views as she shares her cultural perspective with an eager audience. But the creative path wasn't always that clear. Growing up in Hong Kong, her parents urged her to play it safe. But Inga knew she wanted more. We'll get back to the podcast right after this break. Business Made Simple, hosted by Donald Miller, is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. Hosted by Donald Miller, Business Made Simple takes the mystery out of growing your business. One of my favorite episodes is about how you can create a subscription model for your business. Like, what if you had recurring revenue that covered most, if not all, of your monthly expenses? Anything on top of that would be pure profit and maybe money towards that yacht. So if your business is seasonal or has highly fluctuating monthly cash flow, a subscription model could help you stabilize your revenue stream and cover your monthly overhead. So listen to Business Made Simple wherever you get your podcasts. And now, back to the podcast. So, could you tell me about maybe some of like your earliest memories growing up?
Yeah, so, I think I was born in California, but I went back to Hong Kong pretty soon after because of my dad's work. And growing up in Hong Kong so I think for me, I was too young to be able to recognize any sort of significant difference between living in like 2 different countries. And I would say growing up in Asia, that was all I knew for the longest time, and I think I was fortunate enough, at least, I think so like in that environment, my mom placed a lot of emphasis, especially on like raising me right, and in that case, it's just like sending me to like the best school she could send me to, and sending me to tutoring classes, But I think I would say for the longest time, I didn't really sort of, how do you say, like, it wasn't like I didn't realize that I was living in a box until I feel like I grew a little bit older.
Yeah, it's like you don't recognize your culture when that's all you've ever known. It's only when you're maybe introduced to another culture that you realize, oh wow, like these are different, and now I understand what are the boundaries of my culture, because before it was just like life and regular life.
Yeah, that's exactly it, like it's life as you know it, and you don't really question as much. I think there was always a part of me though that wanted to, for example, go back to California. There was always a part of me that wanted to know what was there on the other side of the world. I mean, part of it has to do with, how I will say like media, like Hollywood glamorizes it. America is like the land of everything possible. And I'm like, well, I was born there. And like, I feel like I need to go back there to discover my full potential. So I think there was a little bit of that, but it was more like a dream at that point, when I was younger.
What is the culture in Hong Kong? If America is this place where anything is possible, you could like be as creative as you want, or at least that's what you saw in the movies. Like, what was Hong Kong?
In Hong Kong, like don't get me wrong, I love this city. I love how fast-paced it is, and I love how cosmopolitan it is. But at the same time, I feel like part of it has to do with how, for example, like the apartment, like I think Hong Kong right now is like the most expensive place to buy an apartment like in the world. When you have this sort of idea over your head of like, I need to work to survive. I need to work to find a shelter, like a roof over my head. I feel like you need to be very realistic in terms of like what kind of careers you pursue, you know? And I feel like a lot of times, and this also has to do with my upbringing, right? With parents who, well, my mom especially, I feel like she was worried for me, right? It's like every parent worries for their child. They want you to be able to take care of yourself. So it is a lot of, the culture that I'm talking about here is a lot of like prioritizing stability over anything that is like out of pure desire.
I'd love to talk a little bit about like the summer and winter breaks in Taiwan, because you had this influence of Hong Kong culture, and then you would go to Taiwan, and like I'm curious about how those cultures differed, or if they did, and what you saw when you would go over there.
Yeah, so I think and this is part of the reason why I love Taiwan so much. I feel like every time I was in Taiwan, it was to visit my grandparents. It was, it was for fun. And even if I went for summer school is more fun than, like normal school. And so my picture of Taiwan, my experiences of Taiwan were always like full of joy. I felt like everyone was happier there. The pace of life is slower there. Everyone's like super friendly, and I didn't feel the same pressures I felt when I was in Hong Kong. And I think it's just why I love everything about it so much, and why I feel so strongly about it, even though a much bigger part of my life was spent in Hong Kong.
When you were there, like visiting family, did food ever play a role in your life at that point?
Oh, 100%. I think Taiwan to me is like synonymous with food, because my grandpa, who is now unfortunately passed away, but he was such like a pillar of, I think, the family in Taiwan. So it's my mom's side of the family that's in Taiwan. And he was this like quiet old man who like never spoke much, but like would cook and cook and cook. And in many ways, to me, like I always said, like that, I realized afterwards that like this was his love language, like he's not a man who tells you that like I love you or whatever, but he will wake up extra early just to go to the market, and then like make dumplings fresh in the morning just for you. And then like if you're saying I'm hungry, he's like, give me a second, and we'll spend literally like an hour in the kitchen just to make you food. Like, so I think to me, right, this is why I think food to me has always been so much more than just sustenance, because it is the way that I don't know, I guess it's the way that like I felt loved in many ways. And that's something that I really think started with my grandpa, because it's just something that I think back then I definitely took for granted. I was like, oh yeah, grandpa's gonna make something. But now when I think back on it, it's like, wow, he really did so much for us, Whenever people ask me like, oh, what's your favorite food to eat off the plane? It's beef noodle soup, because my grandpa, every time when we visited, like when we flew in from Hong Kong, he would always he would always be like, okay, let's go home. I have beef noodle soup ready for you. Don't eat anything else. So that to me is like something that he would always make from scratch, that is still, I think right now, my favorite food. And I don't know, there's so many memories. Like even when he was making dumplings for us at home, so like Lunar New Year, for example, he would make like, I don't know, like 200, 300 dumplings, and where he would play this little game and he would put like lotus seeds in some of them. And if you get the ones with lotus seed, first of all, you have to finish it. And then once you finish it, you get like a little red packet with money, with pocket money. And so, and when he makes these dumplings, I would just stand next to him and just see him roll it out, and just like literally every single wrapper, he would just roll it out by hand. There's like no shortcuts taken. And I would just love watching him do it.
Eventually, you would go to international school in the U.S. and New Mexico. So gearing up for that move and that next step of your life, what is your perception of America as you're about to like step foot, and not just step foot, but like actually live there for a little bit? How are you thinking about this transition?
So when I finally got the opportunity to come to the States, right, I think I had this like, what's the word? Just like this it's almost like a dream. It was like this fantasy world of like what America and the possibilities are. I was like, oh, everybody's gonna look like Brad Pitt. Everyone's gonna look, and like the food's gonna be amazing. I'm gonna have burgers every day. And like, but I think more than anything, that's the superficial stuff. But more than anything, it felt to me like I could be anyone. I don't just have to be a lawyer. I don't just have to be a doctor. This is my chance to see the world beyond Hong Kong, So I was very excited. I think literally growing up, I was always waiting. I always told my friends, like, I'm going to go one day. I'm going to go back to California one day. I'm going to go back to the States one day. I think because that, I don't know, I think in my brain, America was synonymous with all the possibilities in the world. And I think so when I finally got to do it, I was just beyond excited.
We're super excited for all these possibilities. What does it actually look like when you get there? Like, what is international school in New Mexico like? And also, what is it like being outside of Asia? Because we talked a little bit about at the beginning, like, you don't realize what your culture is until you're outside of it. So what were you realizing about America as you were ingrained in the day-to-day life of American culture? But also, what was it like being outside of Asia and maybe viewing Hong Kong through a different lens and perspective?
So I will say that the international school I went to was not, I think, your typical international school. This school I went to, called United World College, we only had 200 people on campus, and every other student is basically from a different country. So it wasn't just American culture, it was all the cultures in the world. And so for me, like, yes, we were in New Mexico, but we were also in like the campus was the only thing in that zip code. So we were very sort of isolated, but I will say what it did. So there was a lot of culture shock, not just from being in America, but just from being around all these people who are asking each other questions about like where you're from, what is it like there, And so for the first time in my life, I was in among people who like had not, they didn't share the same background I had, they didn't share the same experiences I had. And I felt very put in the spot in the beginning because I was like, they were like, what is Hong Kong like? What do you do there? What does it look like? What are the people like? And these were all questions that I had never really thought about before because nobody would ask me that. Like even if I traveled to other parts of Asia, I feel like, people would still have a common knowledge because they fly around so much. But so I think it was the first time that I really had to think about like, yeah, what does it mean to have grown up in Hong Kong? What are the Hong Kong specialties? Like, let's talk about, like, let's say like food. I can talk about food, but also like, they would be like, what are the cultural what holidays that you celebrate? And suddenly I have to explain like Lunar New Year and like, Mid-Autumn Festival and all these things. And so it was very eye-opening for me in a way that I don't think it was something that I thought about before I traveled over, right? Because all I thought about was like me absorbing all this extra knowledge, whereas in this context, I'm kind of the one who has to represent in a way of like, let me tell you more about where I'm coming from. And so I think that's where it all started, of like reflecting upon my identity a little bit more.
Where do you guys find like common ground? So, because I can imagine coming from all over the world. I mean, there's like different cultural customs. There's different ways to show respect. So I would love to hear a little bit more about the culture shock and maybe some examples of that. But also maybe on the flip side, like where you all found common ground. Like what was the thing uniting this whole school where everyone's just so incredibly different?
Well, I will say the first, like, most common experience was that everyone was so excited to be off on themselves. Like everyone was so excited to just be like, I'm away from family, I'm on this campus together. And that, I think, was really the overarching, like, thing that tied us all together, because we were all like young people in this place with a lot to learn and so isolated from everyone that you're almost like very strongly encouraged. Also, there were no phones allowed. So we were very just sort of like strongly encouraged to interact with each other. And I think even though there are a lot of differences in terms of like, yes, culture shock, because like maybe the etiquette is different, maybe sort of like growing up in Hong Kong, I think I always had a more like sort of conservative nature versus like, someone from I don't know, France, who's like a lot more open, and they greet you with like, hello, a kiss on the cheek. And then for me, I'm like, whoa, that's like a lot, but at the same time, I think the similarities, right, are even the example of like, oh, my grandparents would make me food. That was like a universal thing for a lot of people. They were like, oh yeah, I grew up with like my mom's cooking, or like my grandma's cooking, my sister's cooking, So there's a lot of experiences, like, of course, slightly different, but I would say like, even like, let's say going to an all-girls school for most of my life, and somebody else has had that same experience like in another part of the world, So I would say there are common things, and the more you talk, you realize that on the surface, everyone's like very different, but I really think underneath it all, there's a lot of similar and shared experiences that aren't actually that hard for us to relate to each other with.
So you have this experience of like empathy and culture shock and like this cultural melting pot. I imagine you missed home. And I imagine in New Mexico, there's not a ton of opportunities for finding the type of ingredients maybe that you ate back, or like maybe the type of foods that you ate back at home. And so did you start cooking for yourself? Did you bring a little bit of the taste of home to this new arena? So yes, I did, because our cafeteria food was not the best. It was I think, but that's like for all, I think, like schools that have like dorms and stuff, after a while you just get tired of it, and like pair that with the homesickness. So of course, I started cooking a lot more on campus, and also, so like we also had these on campus, we also had these like cultural days, and for one of the events, I made just like beef noodle soup for the entire campus. That was pretty cool. That was the first time I think I made beef noodle soup, like, period, and it was for like, I don't know, like 300 people. So, but it was good. It was very exciting. Wow,
yeah,
that's insane.
I know. Like, isn't that
300 people?
Yeah. So, but I was just excited. I should have probably thought it through a little bit more, because I was like, this is a lot. It's not just like cooking for one person and like screwing up, but hey, they liked it. So
when you go back to Hong Kong, how are you thinking about going to college? Where are you thinking you want to go? And is it an obvious choice to go back to the States, or is it a hard decision?
I think at that point, after 2 years, so even before that, the reason I went to international school for 2 years was because I wasn't sure yet if I was ready for college. Because what I did for the international school was actually 2 extra years of school. At that point, I had already graduated from 12th grade, and I could have gone straight to university, but international school was also for me an experience to try and see if I was okay with living on my own and, being in America. And so after those 2 years, I think it only solidified the fact that like I was like, I want to go to college here. This is where I want to learn and continue growing.
So how do you decide on the College of Idaho?
When it came to applying colleges, also I was very young still, I think. And I, of course, wanted to go to all the like Ivy Leagues. I wanted to apply to all the schools that had like the huge names partially because my parents wanted it. I wanted it. It's more of those. I feel like everyone else I wanted. But I feel like I also grossly underestimated myself. So like what I did was I literally only applied to like the highest tier schools, and then I didn't apply to like anything else. So what happened was I did not get accepted into any of the higher, like any of the Ivy Leagues I applied to, which honestly I'm not surprised thinking back on it. But and then what happened was then I was like, okay, then what do I do now? Do I wait another year and try to apply again? Like what's the situation here? My international school has some relationships with like several colleges in the States. I just sat down with the guidance counselor and like I was obviously like freaking out, and I think they were like,
I'm not gonna go to college.
Yeah, I'm like, I failed my parents. I don't know what I'm doing. What should I do? Should I go home? But I think what happened was that obviously told me to like be calm. It's okay. We're gonna figure it out. And at that point, too, one of my my second years, which is how we refer to the people above us back then, who had already gone to the College of Idaho. My guidance counselor linked me up with him and the admissions officer there and said like they would love to have me, they really want, because I think they also were trying to recruit more international students. They wanted more kind of like representation on campus, and they were like, we think you would love it here. We're happy to like, and they had like a rolling admission. Is that what you call it? And then they were offering me like a full scholarship. They were basically giving me the entire package. They're like, just come to us. We would love to have you. Even though I hadn't applied, they were like, if you apply now, we're happy to review it. So it was really just like very fortunate. I think that there was that relationship there.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, it seems like everything came together. You went to the right school, and then it seems like the College of Idaho was like, okay, like I see everything you've done, and we want you here. So when you went to the College of Idaho, I guess I want to understand your move towards film, because it didn't start necessarily as being interested in film, and I don't think the College of Idaho even had a film studies major. So how did you find your way towards film within?
So I think there were always parts of that thread through, my experience growing up, and the reason I actually started thinking of film as an opportunity was not even because of like making film. It was because I took a film studies course in my freshman year, and I thought it was fascinating. I mean, it was very different from like actually being on set and filming, because this is more like an academic, like, analysis sort of role. But even within that realm, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I want to explore this a little more. So I started looking into like, okay, what are the sort of roles that I can take within this industry, because it's so huge. Is there a path for me here?
And I would love to go next to like starting film club on campus, because again, like it seemed like you had an ability to create the opportunities that you wanted to. So how did you start diving more into film after this class?
So the truth is, after I took this class and I started considering film as an option, I thought about transferring out of the school, because I was like, oh, College of Idaho doesn't have film as a major, and I want to explore this more. But then I had another conversation with, this time it was the academic officer at College of Idaho, and they were saying like, instead of thinking about the opportunities you don't have here, why don't you try creating them yourself? Like, why don't you, this is an opportunity for you to start something here. Whereas if you go there, you'll just be part of something. But here you can own something. And I think that's when I really started leaning into this idea of like taking initiative. And so I think that it was also that officer who told me that way back then they had somebody do a film club, but it kind of died. And like he was like, so maybe that's something that can inspire you to try and do something here. So that's when I started the Film Society. And adjacent to that, I was also talking to our marketing department, because at that point, College of Idaho had like a little YouTube channel, and I was like, oh, I feel like this is a chance for me to help them create videos. I was like, oh, is there anything we can do for you? And the marketing department head, the video marketing department head was like, how about you sign on? How about you come join me as an intern?
Was that the first time that you got involved in YouTube?
Yes. So that was the first time that I did anything on YouTube from like the production standpoint. At that point, I was just like an avid consumer of content.
What did you think getting on the other side of it? Was YouTube something at this point that felt tangible and real and that you could like move forward with? Or was it like, okay, like this is just a stepping stone to real film, or as someone might think at that point?
Yeah, so I think at that point, I didn't really consider working on YouTube as an option yet. So I think for me, it was more just a lot of learning, like actual filming, and it's more about the shooting, the ideation, but not so much even geared for YouTube yet. It was still very much like the initial steps of like, what is even filming? Like, what does work look like in this industry on this level?
Yeah, and I feel like you didn't just want to see it at the college level, like you wanted to see it at the highest level, and maybe bring those two worlds together. So when did you start planning a trip to the Sundance Film Festival? We'll get back to the podcast right after this break. We all have bad habits. Some of us, it's, not stacking the dishwasher, not taking out the trash, maybe picking your nose in the car when you think no one's looking, but everyone on the freeway can see it, including on the off chance of one of your coworkers, which is just one way bad habits tend to find their ways into business. From emailing clients at who knows o'clock, or spending way too much time and money on legacy software your IT person grandfathered in. That stuff is old and needs to be destroyed. We're breaking up with bad business habits right now, right here. It's 2023. No bad business habits here. HubSpot's all-in-one CRM platform can help you get there. It makes it easy to better connect your teams, data, and systems so you can better connect with your customers. Best of all, it's free to get started. So learn how HubSpot can help your business grow better in 2023 at HubSpot.com. And now, back to the podcast.
The Sundance Film Festival, I believe I also learned about it through my film studies course, because my professor at that point, I think he was involved, he knew people involved with it to some extent. And so that's when I started exploring this is the place where a lot of new films come out, and this is a place where, a lot of really knowledgeable film people get together and watch films. I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to just be there and just absorb all this knowledge there, right? Just to see what it's like, because we don't know what it's like. And so that's when I think I approached him, and then I was able to kind of reach out and, organize this little campus trip for the members of the organization and allow us to go and watch.
And what was it like actually being at Sundance? What did that open up for you in your mind?
I will say at that point, because I was so young, did I really know what I was doing? Probably not, I just remember it was the concept that blew my mind, and being there and seeing people stand up and clap and talk about, hearing snippets of conversation of how people are oh, that was the greatest film ever, I think more than anything, it was just realizing that there is a world out there where people are so fascinated with this industry that they are willing to do all these things to be part of it.
Yeah, and again, you're heading towards this land of legitimacy where you're seeing people perform at the highest level in this industry, and it's okay, if these people can do it, maybe I can too. But I'm curious to hear how what your parents thought of this growing interest, and also as you're maybe going back to Hong Kong or other places for internships, are you thinking okay, I need to get a film internship, or are you still trying to fit into a mold of maybe what is more acceptable in the Hong Kong world?
I will say my parents were not the most excited about this turn of events. I mean, my mom was not happy with it, for one. She was this is all a dream, you should be a little more rooted to the ground, it's great to have dreams, but your dreams will not pay the bills, so maybe you should think about something else. And then my dad was I support you, but I only support you if you become the Academy Award-winning director. That's if you go this path, it's that or nothing. And so I was woof, these are not really the most encouraging messages to have. And then Yes.
Yikes.
I mean, but like understandable, it's understandable. I get it. Like it is a lot to take. When I was in Hong Kong, I wanted to try and explore something different because I was like, okay, maybe I just need to give these other things a chance. So I applied to this company as an internship. They had this like summer trainee program, and so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna give this a try. And the reason I remember it so vividly is because one of the questions that they asked at this seminar was, what's your biggest dream? Okay. And then this one guy raised his hand and he said, my dream is to be able to buy an apartment. Okay. This was his dream. His biggest dream in the world was to buy an apartment. And then the host asked, okay, how many other people share this as their biggest dreams? And like I kid you not, 99% of the room raised their hands. Like this was their biggest dream in life, to buy an apartment in the city, which I get because an apartment is so expensive. But at the same time, I think to me, I just remember sitting there and being like, this is not it for me. Like, I don't want this to be my biggest dream. Like that's a necessity. That is not a desire. That is not like you are so much more than just buying an apartment, And I remember relaying this to my mentor as part of the trainee program. I told him, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, I still want to pursue film, because I had to be honest about like kind of what I wanted to do, right? And he told me, and this is mentor. Like I truly I respected him so much. Like I think he was a very good mentor figure for me. But he told me, Inga, I think it's great that you have such big dreams, but I think sometimes you just need to think more realistically. Like, I think you're dreaming too much, I think you need to anchor yourself back down. And I just remember being so sad, I was so disappointed because I was like, I know I can do it. Like I'm doing, like at that point, right, in Idaho, I was already doing things. I was doing this organization thing. I was like organizing things to Sundance. Like, I'm like, but I'm on my way. Like, I don't want, like, don't tell me I can't do it, Like, it was kind of that mentality. And I feel like in many ways that almost like solidified my desire to continue what I was doing because it's almost like part of me wanted to prove them wrong, It was like, we can be so much more than this. So, yeah.
And you're just getting started too. And it's like you have all of this momentum. And it's like, how can you say that I should ground myself before I've even had the chance to really like try and soar, like try this dream.
Yeah.
I feel like I maybe would get that advice if you're like going at it for like 5-10 years and like not like there's no momentum, but you're like, this is like the beginning, like allow yourself to fail and try these things, right? How are you trying to figure out your career path? What are your parents thinking about what you're doing? Where are you in the world? How are you figuring out how to support yourself?
Actually, the first time I applied to Tasty was when I was still in college, and then I never heard back. And then I was like, okay, well, that's it, and I put that down for a little bit, and then I graduated. I did 2 study abroad programs, which was really cool. I think I got to see more of the world on one, and I got to study film a little bit on one. But then it was graduation, and I did not know what I was going to do. Some people, I think they graduate with like a job ready for them. I didn't even know what job I wanted to apply to, like at that point. And so my dad's suggestion was like, why don't you take a year off and just do a little bit of traveling, So I backpacked around China for most of that year, just like going around. It was the one time in my life where I wasn't tied down by any responsibilities yet. It's almost like you can say that I was procrastinating on figuring out my life, but at the same time, I feel like I was learning a lot more about myself, and like, it was like one of those like self-exploration. It sounds really cheesy, but I really do think a lot of the memories and experiences I had on that trip is still relevant now to me in my line of work. But yeah, so I took a year off, and then I told my parents, like, I'm just gonna go to LA. I'm gonna go to LA because that's where all the films are made. That's where I feel like I have to be for this industry. And so I moved to LA. The first 2 months, I was trying to apply to like a million jobs. I was lucky enough to have my parents support me, for rent and stuff, but I felt really guilty. Like, I think there was this huge feeling of guilt because, one, I knew this wasn't the career that they wanted me to pursue, and two, I wasn't making any income, and LA rent was really expensive. And so that's when I took like a part-time job. I was a server at like a hot pot restaurant in the area I was living in. So I was really living how people picture the struggling artist to be, but I think for me it was good because there was also almost a part of me that was like, I need to experience this. I need to really fight for this, it's because it's not easy. Like, I knew in my head it wasn't easy. I was like also cold calling companies, like, hey, like, I would love to intern for you. Like, you don't have to pay me or like whatever.
I will do work for free. Just give me experience.
Honestly, yes. Like, this struggle is so real and I relate so hard. Like, I remember just coming back to my Airbnb. That was I was renting like a little room in like a house, and just like there were days when I would just sit there and like wonder if I made the right decision, I was like, I don't know if this is the right choice. I'm not making any money. Should I not have been so stubborn? Should I just have pursued something safe, And I think ultimately it was me who told my parents, like, look, give me just like 1 or 2 more months. If I can't find a job in this industry, I will find another job. It doesn't matter what job it is. I'll just find another job and I'll just do that.
So you gave an ultimatum for yourself.
Yes, because, guilt was a huge driving force for me. Like, as much as I wanted it, I didn't want to be holding anyone down, even though maybe I wasn't, but in my mind, I was like, I'm a disappointment and I don't want to be a disappointment, So that was the part of my life where, like, when I almost, like, I guess, like, gave up on my dream.
And that must have been like a super tough period of time because it's like so many people, it doesn't work out for them, or they don't push enough, or they don't give themselves enough time, or the economics gets in the way, and they have to pursue the safe option. And then it's like, does that opportunity appear again?
Yeah.
Right. And there's big stakes at this point. When do you get a little bit of a break?
So Food Beast is a media production company. It's like they work primarily with food content. It wasn't tasty per se, but it was, I think, more in lines of like digital media, which was an area that I was really starting to lean into because of BuzzFeed. And so I reached out to somebody who worked at Food Beast at that time, and literally on LinkedIn, I just sent them a message. He was like, all right, if you want to come and like give it a try, because I know you have video editing experience, let's give it a try. So I got in my car and drove 1.5 hours to the OC, and I did it. And he was like, okay, come back. And then that's how I got the internship. And so for, I think, at least like 2 months of my life, I was driving 1.5 hours every day to this internship and driving 1.5 hours back to sleep.
Wow, that is commitment.
Yes, but like, I think at that point, I was just so relieved that I got anything remotely similar to what I wanted to do, and I was learning a little bit of like what virality meant. I was learning like what food production looks like. It was the first time I saw like a set for food, like of working with food stylists, things like that. But then, so at that point, but I was still an intern, right? And I was still applying at a million jobs. And in that time of my life was my second attempt at applying to BuzzFeed, this time as a video fellow. And so I remember getting a call, like I jumped on an interview with them and I was like, okay, it went well. But I feel like at that point, I don't want to say I was like so defeated that I didn't get my hopes up, but I was just like, okay, the interview is there. I just hope for the best, fingers crossed. But like, if it doesn't, like, it's okay. Just keep looking forward. And it was actually one day when I was preparing for a shoot for Food Beast that I got a call from the person who interviewed me at BuzzFeed. And she was just like, hey, I just wanted to call you to see if you had any other questions. And I was so caught off guard because I was like, I am about to go on the shoot. We're just waiting for talent to get here. But I will call you back if I have any questions. And she was like, okay, call me back when you can. And then I hung up and then I was like, that was really weird. Why would she just call me to ask me if I had any questions? I feel like I'm missing something here. So I like excused myself and went to the bathroom. and like immediately thought up of some questions, whatever. Literally 15 minutes later, I was like, hi, I'm so sorry. I'm just calling back, and I asked my questions. And at the end of the call, she was like, great, thanks for your questions. I just wanted to let you know that we have accepted you as a video fellow. But the first thing I said was like, is this a joke? Is this a prank? Like I was so like shocked, you know, because I was like, what just happened? Like, what? But so that's how I got it. How I knew that I got the video fellowship, and I was just so thrilled, I think. Yeah, and then I believe the next day was when I told the people at Food Beast, and they were really happy for me, which I so appreciate. So the first thing I did that night was call my parents.
Yeah, so what are they thinking?
They're obviously just like, what is going on, you know? Because the first time I'm telling them, it's like, I got into BuzzFeed. They're like, what is BuzzFeed? Like, I was like, I've told you about this company before. Like, I told you this is kind of what I want. Anyways, but my point was, I was like, I'm gonna go to New York, you know? Because I was like, if there's one company I'm gonna fly to New York for, this is the company. This is the company that I wanted to apply to years ago that I couldn't get in, and now I got in, so I'm going. But my parents, as confused as they were, I think they were just relieved almost that like, okay, great, like you're on path to something. They were like looking up what BuzzFeed is, like what the, you know, like, is this a legitimate company, you know, all that stuff. But they supported me at that point to move to New York. So yeah.
That must have felt really good.
I was ecstatic. I was so happy. Like, I think for me, because a lot of times people are like, oh, what's your dream job? You know, and at that point, this was my dream job. Just stepping into that office, I think to me just felt like, it felt so surreal, you know? Because I was like, everything I've done up to now, it's worth it because I'm here now, you know? I was able to make this happen. Yeah, I still remember the joy I felt that day. I'm like receiving like all the like merch and stuff. It's so nerdy, it's so geeky, but like for me to be able to recognize that my efforts paid off, that was honestly the biggest satisfaction.
This is maybe one of the most momentous times where it's like, okay, all this hard work that I've done has paid off. Now I can climb even higher. I can go wherever I want. So what did the fellowship program actually look like?
Actually, the first rotation we went through was for social, and I can't remember what I did, so I don't know if I... But social, it was like creating memes. That's the first assignment we had to do. But, you know, it was a lot about like how to think BuzzFeed. The second assignment I did was to write an article. And again, this was just to help you learn the BuzzFeed voice and to develop your own voice, to see like what kind of your interests are and how I could fit in with BuzzFeed as a company. And I remember for that article too, I was struggling to find out, like to figure out like, oh, what should I write about, you know? And it was the video fellowship head who encouraged me. She was like, you shared a lot in your interview about like your Asian American experience. Is that something that you would want to write about? And I was like, oh yeah, I don't know if anybody would want to read that, but okay, I will write that. So I wrote this article on like Asian parents.
29 things that are too damn real for people raised by Asian parents?
Yes, and it went viral on the website. And it was just like little things of like, you don't wear shoes in a house, or like, you know, food is the love language, you know, kind of things like that. And as happy as I was that it worked well, that it was received well, I think for me it was acknowledging that like people do love to learn more about stuff, like, because it wasn't just like, even though it was like the Asian American Asian experience, a lot of other like POC related to all of the points I made. You know, they were like, and this goes back to like what we were saying about like the shared experiences across cultures. Like these are a lot of like common experiences everybody loves, everyone relates to. That was the time when I was like, okay, so I think this is the space for me.
It validates like your own experience too. It's like I have the ability to authentically express myself to the internet, to this wide swath of people, and they are accepting of that.
Yes. You know, I think a lot of times with virality, people always think about like, oh, what's viral? You know, like I just want to do what's viral, you know, but that's how content becomes saturated, right? Like, because there's so much content out there, and if everybody's trying to do what's the popular thing to do, then they all become the same thing. And so for me, it was like, oh, my perspective can add to this conversation. And so I think in many ways, even now, my content is shaped the same way. And that leads into like when I did my video assignment, right? I was like, okay, what can I offer here? And the first ever video I did actually was Asian Americans try Asian Halloween costumes. It's like a fun, lighthearted video that has a more like heavier context, but it was again with the
social
identity.
Commentary built in.
Yes. It was also exploration for me because I was like, okay, this does hit upon that like identity conversation that I want to have, but is there a way for me to do it that is a little more exploratory,
or maybe palatable. Like in that video, you're playing around with this idea of like, okay, I'm trying to communicate something that is a problem or something that needs to be addressed or a conversation that needs to happen, but I need to express it in a way that's actually like going to be palatable. And so actually people actually watch it and it reaches people.
Yeah. It was definitely one of the things where I felt like, is there another way I can approach this? Or is there another way that I can lead into this conversation about learning about different cultures without being so aggressively opinionated? I don't know, because that video was very controversial in a way of like, people had very strong feelings about it. And so the next video I did, which is where I kind of dived into food a little bit more, was people tried gourmet instant ramen. And it was just like, people trying different instant ramens from all around Asia. And this idea came from when I first came from Hong Kong to New Mexico, and they told me that there's only one brand of instant ramen and most people microwave their instant ramen. I was shocked. I was like, what? And so this video came from that point where I was like, the world needs to know that there are greater things. Like instant ramen should be loved and not like considered the cheap college food, And it got that reaction. A lot of people were like, I didn't even know that food like this existed. I think that's when the spark really started of like I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I came to do.
So you're doing these one-off videos with BuzzFeed. And in 2020, there's two things that I'd love to dive into. One being like the co-creator and lead for About to Eat. And then two, starting your personal channel. And from the outside perspective, that seems like a leg up or a or like a sign of taking more ownership, because like if you can build your own channel, then that creates so much freedom and possibility and growth. Like that maybe could be like the next BuzzFeed. And then with About to Eat, it's like you have this show that you have more creative control over, and most likely I don't know what the deal structure would be, but more ownership over, at least creatively, possibly economically as well. So I'd love to dive into those two projects.
So I would say, at BuzzFeed, for the longest time, for 3.5 to 4 years, I was mostly just doing these like one-off videos or like, mini series. And then I think during quarantine, and I talk about quarantine because like there was so much time at home with myself. I wanted to just try something new, and as great as it is to work for a huge platform like BuzzFeed, I feel like a lot of times working in a company, you can't entirely shape content the way you want it to be. I think there's like a natural pace that you have to fit in, for example, or tone. Whereas I was like, what if I approach this the way that I wanted to approach it? That it's no notes. It's just me as it is, as I wanted to present to the world. And that's when I started doing a lot of these videos on my own channel. And they were more like relaxed pace. They're more slow paced. They're a little more like friendly. They're not like as crazy, like chaotic energy. It's a lot of times just me trying to be it's almost like being with a friend. I think that's kind of the energy that I wanted to translate. And I think it was, for me, my channel was like this, almost like an emotional outlet for me to be able to do whatever I wanted, after having to be so structured in the way I think for, to put a video on like a much larger platform, this was like almost like a sigh of relief, if you will. It was like, here it is, something that is more me, and I want you to have it. And then in line with that, I think About to Eat, which is a channel that I co-created with a few other producers. We wanted to carve out a space where in food.
Were these producers at BuzzFeed?
Yes. We wanted to create a space that felt a little more from the heart, because that's the content we wanted to make. Not to say the other content isn't, but I think we wanted it to feel like kind of in line with, I guess, my channel, where I wanted things to feel a little more personal. I think we wanted to approach content in a way that felt exploratory, that wasn't just like, what's the next viral thing, but like, let's talk about food. It's almost like because we're all people who like share this passion for food. We could talk about food for hours, and we're like, we want to create a space for people who like to get nerdy about food, who want to discover, not just the recipes, but like, why is this recipe even here, and so like, that's also where I do like my 24 hours frame, which is a show that I do, I've done a lot for BuzzFeed. My approach has changed, where before it was more like, look at this cool thing, and like, look at this, it's just like very like snappy. And now it's more like, hey, like I have a recipe book, or like, I'm going to dive into this culture today, and we're going to just come explore with me. Let's just relax, but like learn about something new. And it's very much more like discovery. It's very more about curiosity, which is something that I know that we all wanted to do, and being able to kind of create a channel, a space for that with an audience now that has grown to appreciate it. I think that to me has been like an incredible next step to kind of explore like a different area of creativity for me.
What you are most excited about and working on now, and what the future looks like.
Right now, what I'm most excited about is, I really think I want to work on my channel some more. I want to do more things where I feel like right now I'm in this phase too of like, with TikTok growing and all these things, there's so much, everything out there is so loud right now, where I'm like, I want to see if I could develop something new. And I want it to be for my own channel. I want to do something that feels, that feels different in a way that adds to the conversation. This is what I think my biggest fear is, like, further saturating content that's already out there. And I think my joy comes from being able to discover something new that people also enjoy and love. So I think that's my next goal that I'm excited to work on.
If you were to like drop back in time to give yourself a piece of advice, or if you were to give a piece of advice to someone who is going through that now, what piece of advice do you think you would give that person to make the road a little bit more efficient, a little less, maybe with a little less heartache? What advice do you think you would give that person?
My advice for those who are, still trying to build a path for themselves is like, I know, again, it's been said before, but I really think it's important to just keep pushing through. I think for me, that was the biggest thing. If I had given up at that point, at the first sign of failure, I would not be where I am now. Like, I really think you have to constantly remind yourself that what you're doing is worth it. And it really is. Even every failure, I really do think, just contributes to a future success. Like, and I'm not just saying this for it to sound good, but I think that everything I've learned from failing has in many ways helped me even now. So the biggest thing really is to be as strong as you can, and just believe that it's going to go somewhere, because that belief really is what's going to help you stay determined and keep going on.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, DM us at Finding Founders Podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Finding Founders is produced and hosted by me, Samuel Donner.
Our Chief of Staff and Operations is Jessica Lynn.
Our audio editing team lead is Adrian Tapia, with support from
Irene Van Berkel,
Matt Fernandez,
Renee Buchanan,
Sophia Donner,
David Saidi,
Ashley Jimenez,
Nicholas Guzman,
Aaron Devereaux,
Sanessa Gisley,
and Lois Choi.
Our outreach and research lead is Kenny Ong, with support from
Sarah Hobson,
Charisse Tan,
Harushi Kanauchi,
Kristen Hagelin,
Aya Cortez,
and Valencia Lu.
Our writing team lead is Elizabeth Bowen with support from
Aiden Ashworth,
Nikki Mukawa,
Sylvie Wang,
and Eric Mena.
Our design team lead is Shruti Ramanand with support from
Tiffany Dang,
Yao Liu,
and Dina Gabriel.
To see more of what we're up to, subscribe to our newsletter at findingfounders.co. Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.